Hey there, this is Andrew, and I'm going to bring to you the one of the three decks that I opened for Sealed Alliance at the Seattle Vault Tour in 2023. And this is Nik L Maniafeld rather, the Brave. Um, and I'm going to show you this deck because it seems awesome. I think it's the best Winds of Exchange deck that I've opened so far. Not the highest SAS, but it really seems to do well. I've been playing it a bit in competitive on TCO and doing well. I wish I had used it for Archon in Seattle, but I talked myself out of it the night before. It can lose for sure, any deck can, but it's got some neat tricks, and I'll show you it, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I ended up doing for Alliance, because I think uh, I've described this before, what my alliance approach is, or my sealed alliance approach, how I evaluate and decide what to do. Um, I've seen people do more complicated maneuvers, but I have a pretty simple approach, and I'll talk about that really quick after I go through this deck. First off, though, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Vincent, who I met in Seattle. Hey, Vincent, thanks for watching the channel. And I think that was my first time having somebody, IRL mention watching the podcast, the channel here. And anyway, it was just a sweet thing for me, and nice talking with you. So, all right, and for everybody else watching, thanks. And if you see me in person, feel free to say hi. And yeah, I try to be nice. All right, so without further ado, let me talk through Nik L Maniafeld the Brave. All right, so this deck is Brobnar, Mars, and Unfathomable. And the token is Grumpus, which I think is not the best token in the world, but it's a pretty darn good token. So Grumpus is a 2-power beast with splash attack 1, and it works very well here. It's just great for keeping board control. Would I rather have like a Berserker or Warrior? Possibly, but I think I'm actually happier with Grumpus over Skirmisher, especially in this deck, and you'll see why later. It's really good. Okay, so but let me come back to that when we cover the Brobnar. For now, I want to cover the fish first, the Unfathomable, because this is really the house that makes the deck tick. This is what makes it strong. If I were to, you know, do an Archon Alliance, this is the house that I would probably carry over. So first, let me talk about the action package. Actually, you know what? First, let me show you a couple of cool creatures. So we got Bryozarch, and I think this really is and should be a chase card. I think you're going to see a lot of strong decks in Winds of Exchange bring a Bryozarch. So it's a 6-power Aquan that says when your opponent plays an action card, instead of resolving its play effect, destroy the creature on your left flank. That's really powerful. It turns Gateway of Dis into destroy one creature. It turns Implosion into destroy this particular creature. It turns Too Much to Protect into destroy a creature. And that's really strong to be able to turn off all those actions like that. Now, your creatures are being destroyed as this is happening, so in order for this to stick on the board, you need a couple of things. First of all, you need a way to protect it against action destruction by having a lot of creatures to the left of it. The more creatures you can have to the left, the safer Bryozarch is from just being destroyed by your opponent playing like 4 actions on a turn or something like that. The second thing you need is protection from board threats. There's some artifacts that you might not be able to get around, like Anomaly Exploiter, but the scarier things are, just big creatures. Those are actually more likely to kill the Bryozarch. And if you're against a Berserker deck, probably Bryozarch dies unless you have some form of taunt, which I think is really good with Bryozarch if you can have taunt. I have one deck like that, not this one. But the other thing you can do is just keep the board clear with your other creatures, and that's where, hey, Grumpus is actually pretty good, because if we can keep the board clear, then Bryozarch is relatively safe. All right, enough gushing about Bryozarch. It's a great card. Timothy the Damned is also a great card. 4-power Aquan. Play, make a token creature, and while you control a token creature, your opponent cannot forge keys. So obviously, both of these want a deck that can make tokens, make a lot of tokens to keep them on the board. And lo and behold, this deck does that pretty okay. The other creatures in here are classic Bubbles. This one has a damage pip on it. Put an enemy creature on top of its owner's deck, and it's a 5-power body, so helps keep the board clear in both ways. I learned recently, I figured out Bubbles and Sybil Waymare is a pretty interesting combo. Sybil Waymare is a 5-power Aquan that says at the start of your opponent's turn, that player discards the top card of your deck and exhausts each creature of that card's house. If your opponent has 5 creatures of the same house, and you put out a Sybil Waymare, and then you Bubbles one creature of that house to the top of their deck, probably the most threatening one, at the start of their turn, they discard it and then exhaust the rest. That's pretty powerful. In general, just randomly getting it is pretty powerful too, but the Bubbles combo is kind of cool, and hadn't realized that until recently. And the last creature we have in here is Kamalani. This one has a damage pip. 4-power Aquan with destroyed, make 2 token creatures. And that's good for helping keep that buffer. Although if it is destroyed on your opponent's turn, they get to pick where the tokens go. But still, it's really nice to have this as a buffer over on the left side of the board. And if you do destroy it on your turn, then you get to decide where the tokens go. All right. A little bit of board control with Maelstrom, although I usually don't end up using that because usually I'm ahead on board, and so this is usually a discard. But in a panic scenario, it's actually pretty good. We've got a couple of Frigorific Rods, which give us Amber Pips and give us a way to exhaust stuff. That's not bad. Then we have these 4 actions, and these are pretty great. So, Illusions of Grandeur, out of these 4, maybe the weakest. But it's between this and Dragnet for the weakest. But Illusions is a player control card. Gets you an Amber. You choose a house on your opponent's identities card. It works just like Control the Weak. But instead of forcing them into that house, it's just if they choose a different house, you gain 3 Amber. But that is a nice way to push people around. We have Dragnet, which gets you an Amber and returns a creature and each creature that shares a house with it to its owner's hands. In some scenarios, this is just a good way to flood your opponent's hand back with creatures. That's super annoying. I lost a game in Archon against Dragnet for sure. It just stuffed my hand so hard. But it also, you could use it with the Bubbles to get another put on top of the deck. You might use it with Timothy to make another token creature. You could use it with Bryozarch just to reset any damage you have on there. So very flexible card, which is really nice. Sometimes I've even used it with tokens. Maybe I have a tokenized Bryozarch, and Dragnet gets the Grumpus back to my hand, so I can play it back as a Bryozarch. So again, just a really flexible card there, Dragnet. Talked about Illusions. Illusions is great with Befuddle. Befuddle, you choose a house on your opponent's identity card, and they can't play cards of other houses. So sometimes what you do is you say you can only play cards of house X, but if you don't choose house Y, I'm going to gain 3 Amber. So they can either choose a house where they can't play any cards, or they can choose a house where they can play cards, but they're going to give you 3 Amber. That's a really powerful situation to put your opponent in. And lastly here, and this actually makes these cards stronger than Control the Weak in a way, Abyssal Sight lets you destroy a friendly creature, and then if you do, you look at your opponent's hand and choose a card from it. That player discards that card. So you actually knock a specific card out of your opponent's hand. You get to see their whole hand, and if you can combo this on the same turn with Befuddle and or Illusions, it's just really, really powerful. So yeah, really nice control cards there, and just very effective. Abyssal Sight is a just uniquely powerful card. Being able to look at your opponent's whole hand and pick a card to discard, so strong. Especially, again, maybe they have a bubbles or something. They're going to get rid of your Bryozarch, but nope, they're not. It's just so good. All right, on to the Brobnar. I'm going to start with, we've got a couple of Blood of Titans. This is an upgrade with an Amber that gives a creature +5 power. Combine that with the Bryozarch, really nice. Keeps it alive. Combine it with Timothy, very nice. Combine it with Sybil Waymare, very nice. Lots of good options in the fish, and some good options you'll see in Brobnar as well for the Blood of Titans. Sometimes you even just Blood of Titans a Grumpus, make it a 7 power. That can be pretty good too. So it's a really nice card. Then we have a couple. Actually, let me go over the creature situation here first, because I actually think that is where a lot of the power is. So we've got a couple of nice board clears. Hebe the Huge and Earthshaker. Now notice Earthshaker does not kill a single one of our fish cards. It really doesn't affect our fish. That's great. Hebe the Huge can do some damage to our fish, but only if they're not already damaged, so it's not going to finish one off. And these are both doing good, doing a lot of work against the opponent and not much against us. Very good against tokens, against opponents' tokens. They can clear our tokens too. We'll come back to that, but that's pretty great. Then we have Brick Nasty, which means that when we go and fight with the Grumpuses, that's pretty amazing. We're getting Amber and doing a lot of damage, clearing the board. That's excellent. We've got 2 Shock Herders, which means we can do something like play the Earthshaker or Hebe, and then immediately make it fight with the Shock Herder. So that's great. And then last creature we have is Harmal Atun. So Harmal Atun is a 5-power giant Brocken. With each other friendly Brobnar creature gains destroyed, return this creature to its owner's hand. And so this does something crazy. First of all, there's a really interesting combo here where, first off, let's just say if you Shock Herder, let's say your Hebe the Huge, into your opponent's big creature, if you have the Brick Nasty out, you get an Amber. And the Hebe the Huge, instead of dying, it just comes back to your hand with the Harmal Atun. That can be pretty amazing. Now you just drop it back out. But these Shock Herders, if you can, play Hebe the Huge, play a Shock Herder, make it fight, now you play Earthshaker with Harmal Atun out, and the Shock Herder comes back to your hand. That's pretty amazing. And you can play the Shock Herder again. That's great. But don't forget, we have a 2-power Brobnar token. And when this thing dies, if Harmal Atun is out, it comes back to our hand. So that means whatever is under here, we got back as a card. Whether it's a Brobnar action or a high value fish card like Bryozarch or Befuddle. And so what I often find myself doing on Brobnar turns is figuring out the right play order in order to kill my Grumpuses for maximum value and get them back to my hand so I can play them as whatever card they are. It's really good. It's really good. On top of that, we have Fresh Marks, which can be really nice Amber generation if our opponent manages to put down a board, although really I think most of the time opponents end up just giving up, and so usually you don't get a lot of Amber value out of this. But I've had turns where I play Harmal Atun, play Shock Herder to ready the Harmal Atun and reap with it, then Fresh Marks the Shock Herder so it comes back to my hand. I can play it down, ready the Harmal Atun again. There's just cool stuff like that you can do. Or again, you have Harmal Atun out and a Grumpus with a juicy card under it. Fresh Marks, get it back to your hand. It's pretty amazing. Okay, Pound can also do some of that, and it's also good control against the opponent. And then last card here is Feats of Strength. It's an action with an Amber that says for the remainder of the turn, each time an enemy creature is destroyed in a fight, make a token creature. And this does a lot of work. And so it keeps up a situation where you are threatening so many Brobnar tokens that your opponent just feels like, wow, I have to clear those or it's going to be a real problem. All right, there's the Brobnar. Now, I'll just say before I show you the final house, what I ended up doing for Sealed Alliance is I I did my normal process, which is I separate out all 9 houses because it's 3 decks that we got. So I separate all 9 houses and I look at them individually. And I was in a crazy situation of having 2 Bryozarchs in 2 separate pods. So I was like, well, I'm definitely going with one of these Bryozarch pods at this point. But I had to pick which one. And this one, I mean, 6 Amber Pips, a lot of control cards. It just seemed like a no-brainer to go with this one over the other one. All the other one's not horrible. This just seemed strictly better. And then this Brobnar seemed great too. A lot of, 6 pips here, 6 Amber Pips here, along with just some interesting stuff. So, and good token hate, which if you're playing Sealed Woe Alliance, you better bring some token hate. And Hebe the Huge and Earthshaker are both good token hate. So is Grumpus. Okay, so then I, the Mars I looked at and I almost picked the Mars. Again, this is without actually realizing these were all from the same deck. I ended up not going with the Mars, even though I think it's pretty great. It's pretty good. And so what I ended up picking instead was a Saurian house that had 2 Saurariums, which meant that the lowest power creature couldn't reap. And I actually ended up in a very weird situation in round 5. I was one of 2 players, I think, who went 5-0. And I ended up in a situation in round 5 playing against another 4-0 player where he had Bellator and Warrior as his token creature and just kept printing them. But I made sure that we never had creatures below 5 power, and so he couldn't reap with all those Bellator and Warriors. And if he had been able to do that, I would have definitely lost the game, because I don't know if you noticed, what's missing from this is Amber control. But he just wasn't able to reap, and so that kept me ahead. And it had some other cool stuff too, like a Pax Sariana, which is great Amber generation, protects the Bryozarch, a Brachus, which I love. So that was really fun to be able to do that. If I were to build an Archon Alliance, I probably would end up finding something different, although it was really fun to play that way. All right, let me go back into this Mars, because this is what's actually in the deck. And the first thing that's worth noticing is 3 Scoop Ups, which again factors into that really nice board control. If you can, it's great to scoop up a Shock Herder and save those to get value back out again. But it's also these are also very flexible for picking up value cards. If you haven't got the Harmala Tune out yet, but you tokenized a card that you would rather have played as itself, Scoop Up is a great way to get it back because we have an off Mars token. And I think, you know, most of the time, Mars really likes to have an in-house token, but I realize Scoop Up actually plays very nicely with out-of-house tokens if you have basically a high arc, high value per card deck. So 3 Scoop Ups was kind of cool. One of them has a draw pip on it. Notice none of the tokens. Oh no, the tokens actually did come from somewhere in this deck. Oh, from yeah, a Mars creature that'll show up. All right, next I might as well go through the creatures. Yeah, so Glixel Weaponsmith is where these pips came from. The only other 3 creatures in here, and we don't. It turns out like what there are 5 creatures in Fish, 4 in Mars, and more in Brobnar. So you end up a lot of the creatures are in the same house as the token. So it ends up being a lot of room to have like Brobnar be the reap out house, while the other houses are doing more supporting, which is kind of nice to have a setup like that. Okay, so 2 Memrocks and Ironics Rebel, and this is really cool. The 2 Memrocks with the 3 Scoop Ups is just bonkers. It's very easy to get into situations where you can action the Memrocks for a lot of Amber. The last game I played, I ended up scooping up my opponent's Brend, actioning a Memrocks for 3 Amber, playing my other Memrocks and Ironics Rebelling in between them, and then actioning for another 6 Amber over the 2 of these. That was pretty crazy. So fun stuff you can do, and Ironics Rebel then makes a good target for coming back around with with the Nyan Outpost, which will put it at the bottom of the deck and make 2 tokens. So you kind of set up a future good Mars turn again, while setting up for an immediate good Brobnar turn if your opponent can't deal with the board. All right, we also have an Ironics Propaganda. It's the only upgrade in Mars, although we did have 2 upgrades in Brobnar. It's an upgrade that makes a token creature after the creature's attached to fights or reaps, which again factors into being able to do nice token spam, which helps us control the board, helps protect the Bryozarch, just does a lot of good stuff. And lastly, we have a Genetic Blast, good for token control, good for some other things as well if necessary. Space Invaders is kind of fun. You reveal any number of creatures from your hand and you put them down as tokens. That's really interesting and flexible. Probably 2/3 of the time it's a discard, but once in a while it's really fun. I did as a turn 1 play to make 3 tokens, which was great. And then lastly, Destroy Them All, which gives us some artifact control. When you play it, you destroy an artifact, a creature, and an upgrade, and that's a really strong setup. So all in all, the Mars does a lot to really help keep the board clear. I think I probably wouldn't have been wrong to just take the deck as is, but I really had fun playing with the Saurian swapped in too. Now in Archon, I've been having a lot of fun playing it with it this way. So that's that. Went 5-0 in Sealed Alliance with the Fish and Brobnar pods, and then a Saurian pod to go with them. And I've been maybe about upwards of 70% in TCO competitive with just this straight deck, which is not bad, not bad. So, all right. I think I was pretty lucky to open this for Sealed Alliance, and we'll see if my luck holds out. Thanks. That was Nik L Maniafeld the Brave. Hope you enjoyed and that you'll get out there and forge some keys.